Robert Frost is perhaps America's most beloved poet. You might ask why. Well, his poems are very simple, they're easy to understand, you don't have any 5-syllable SAT words, etc., etc. So Robert Frost was an American modernist, which means he was writing roughly between 1920 and 1960, which is when this new wave of poetry came out that was very experimental. The famous modernists, T.S. Eliot, Ezra Pound, Wallace Stevens, to some extent. Frost was living around the same time as all of these poets, and in fact was even living in London in the 1920s, the same time that Eliot was in London. And most people don't know this, but Frost was actually associated with the same publishing house that Eliot was associated with, which is kind of strange because the two have absolutely nothing in common with each other. Frost looked at some of Eliot's poems and said, well, this guy's just never gonna have his poetry read by anyone. And of course, if you look at Eliot's poetry, it's a lot harder to understand than whatever the hell Frost was writing. The reason that Frost's poems are so accessible is because he's sticking to this very traditional meter. Now, in poetry, traditionally, you have a meter, which is sort of the beat of a poem. It gets the poem going. It's the rhythm of the poem. It's sort of like the time signature in music, where you have a certain established pulse that's happening in the poem. Now, traditionally, most English poetry has been written in Iambic Pentameter. The reason we like Iambic Pentameter so much is because it sounds natural to us. It goes da-da, 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 and as you can guess, that sounds like a heartbeat. So for Shakespeare, Iambic Pentameter was often the language of love. It was the language of passion and desire. Obviously, those are very common themes in poetry. So when Eliot and Pound came along, they decided that Iambic Pentameter was too constricting for them. And they sort of did away with Iambic Pentameter for the most part and started writing more experimental poetry that did not necessarily follow a specific meter. So Frost did something very strange, which is that he decided to stick to Iambic Pentameter for the majority of his poetry. An iamb is a sort of poetic unit, let's say. So in poetry, we call these units feet. So in Iambic Pentameter, you have 5 feet, because pent means 5. And an iamb is a unit of poetry that goes short, long, short, long, short, long. So when you read a whole line of poetry, it goes da 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 da. A very famous example of this from Shakespeare. So this is Act 3, Scene 2 of Richard II. This is a very famous speech spoken by Richard II. And here's the line. We're gonna look at it now. And tell sad stories of the death of kings. So you can see it sort of sounds like a heartbeat. However, when we read this line, we're obviously not going to read it as da 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 da. An actor who's reciting these lines of Shakespeare might say, and tell sad stories of the death of kings. But it's important to recognize that this line is written in Iambic Pentameter, which is why it sounds so natural to us, which is why Shakespeare's poetry and Shakespeare's writing is so alluring to us as modern audiences, is that it sounds very natural. It sounds like a heartbeat. Now, most modern poetry doesn't make use of Iambic Pentameter because it's decided that Iambic Pentameter is outdated. However, it does creep in sometimes. Like if you look at this next example, it's from my poem Amendment 36. So you have the line, now I recline and sip a cup of tea. As you can see, it's also in Iambic Pentameter. By the way, this little thing that looks like a U, that's the symbol for short, and the thing that looks like a slash, that's the symbol for long. So short, long, short, long, short, long, short, long, short, long. So Iambic Pentameter is everywhere. It's important to recognize. The reason I just gave that whole rant is because the next poem we're going to look at, Robert Frost's The Silken Tent, is almost completely in Iambic Pentameter. The interesting thing is that Robert Frost breaks Iambic Pentameter in some places, and he does this on purpose because he's Robert Frost and he knows what he's doing. So you might want to pay attention to the places where he doesn't conform to the Iambic Pentameter, and that might be telling us something about the poem and its meaning. She is, as in a field, a silken tent, at midday, when the sunny summer breeze has dried the dew and all its ropes relent, so that in guise it gently sways at ease, and its supporting central cedar pole, that is its pinnacle to heavenward, and signifies the sureness of the soul, seems to owe naught to any single cord, but strictly held by none, is loosely bound by countless silken ties of love and thought to everything on earth the compass round, and only by one's going slightly taught in the capriciousness of summer air is of the slightless bondage made aware.